The retired preacher.
This
so
is
he's
a retired
getting
preacher.
heckled. Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
My name's Larry Gaston. My folks were in Sierra Leone from the late 40s until the late 70s, off and on. And unlike Andrew, I was born in Oklahoma City. But we went for the first time when I was 9 months. And so I've often been asked, were you born in Africa? No, just nearly, you know. I was there off and on until I graduated from high school, and then in those days I got to go back during one summer while I was in college at the Board of Global Ministries expense, and got to visit and made that trip by myself. And that was kind of interesting, traveling internationally that way. Came to Christ November 17, 1964 at Kabbalah at boarding school. Gareth Whitaker helped me with that experience, and felt, actually before I was called to ministry, knew that God wanted me, before I ever became a Christian really, knew God wanted me to be a minister. And I struggled against that call clear until I got halfway through college. And even as a believer, I knew what being in ministry was kind of like, and wasn't sure I wanted to do that. And so I wanted to be first an English teacher and then a history teacher, and finally, okay, Lord. And I went on after went to Oral Roberts University and majored in biblical literature, and then went to seminary at Perkins School of Theology, which for me was a very liberal United Methodist seminary, and struggled with the professors, and we struggled with each other, I think, because I quit being, by the time my second year rolled around, I quit being quiet in class. And so I'd say, oh yeah, well that's what the scripture says. And so we went around. And then I've pastored in Oklahoma, from east to west mostly, all over the state at different times, and enjoyed an effective ministry, leading people in Christ and enjoying in that. And I had one church though where and I'll tell you this story, and then I want to tell a story about my dad. This is why you needed to sit. I was going to take longer. And this is a story about what it means to be in ministry. I went to a church, was appointed there, and I went to this church, and I began to, from the time I got there, say, what do you do at Christmas? Whatever you want, preacher. Well, that's a bear trap. And it's whatever you want, preacher. Well, I decided what I wanted, you know. And we were going to have Christmas Eve service, well, it was a custom of the church that nobody told me about, that Santa Claus showed up at Christmas Eve service and came and knelt and took communion as Santa Claus.
Oh.
And then delivered gifts to the kids.
Oh.
Caught me flat-footed. Well, I served Santa Claus communion that year, and then the next year rolled around and I said, Santa Claus isn't coming to Christmas Eve. If you want Santa Claus in the church, we'll have him the week before Christmas at the church, and he can give gifts then. But I'm not serving communion to a fictional character. And made lots of friends. Well, one of the men in the church during the Christmas parade in town, one of the men in church came up to me and said, I hear we're not doing Santa Claus Christmas Eve. I said, no, we're not. He said, well, you're our pastor, and your job is to keep us happy.
Cool.
And I looked at him and I said, Charles, you are sadly mistaken. My job is to grow you in grace, kicking and screaming if I have to. And that was the end of that discussion. Charles and I became great friends, but he knew where I stood. Now the story about my dad. I told this story this morning, and I was asked that I'd tell it this evening. My older brother, Dean, and I, and Dad was invited to come, and in those days only ordained elders could serve communion, and there were two churches out in the bush from Bow. that were way out in the bush, and Dad was invited to come and serve communion and do baptisms in these churches. So we drove north out of town for several miles, parked the car in the ditch, and started walking. And we walked down the bush path for about 4 miles to the first church. And somebody was carrying our communion service, and somebody was carrying bread, and somebody was carrying grape juice, and they had communion and worship service and communion there to a whole bunch of people. And we only had 2 communion trays, and you filled up one set of trays, and then people drank, and you didn't wash, you just fill up the cups again, We made sure we had communion first, but that's what you had to do. Well, we walked another 3 miles to the next church, and there were 200 people waiting to be baptized. It was a glorious day. They were baptized in the river. There was a river flowing. It was about this deep, and Dad was not used to doing immersions. And so he did them the wrong direction. He put them down with the current and lifted them up against the current. At about 150, he was getting pooped, down, up, down, up, down, up. And it got to where about the last 2 ladies, about 200 people now, I could tell Dad was really pooped and whacked out. He was just, and the 2 ladies were, one was an old granny who was, excuse my language, but she was kind of dried up, and shriveled up and skinny, about as big around as my thumb. And he went to put her down under the water, and she was scared of the water, and she locked halfway down and would not go down. And Dad was pushing on her, and she wouldn't go down. Finally, he picked her up bodily and kind of did a wrestling body slam. He brought her up, and she was happy and praising the Lord. She did that. And Dad looked at the next one, and I don't know what they call these women, merchants nowadays, but she was a market mammy in those days. And she was successful. The way you could tell she was successful was by how much she weighed. Because she was able to get enough money to buy that much food to get in that condition. Her arms were as big as my thighs. And I saw dread in Dad's eyes. Because he could not, Well, he put her under the water, and she was the opposite of the other lady. She must have liked it under there because she didn't help to come back up.
Oh, no.
And he could not lift her against the water. And he kept going like this, and the tendons here popped out, and the veins popped out. And, I could tell he was about to give himself a stroke. So I was sitting up on the bank of the river watching the show with the rest of the pagans, and I started running down into the water to help. And finally, Dad just let her go. And she bobbed downstream a little bit, and then she stood up. It was a glorious day. And it should be made into a movie, But it was a wonderful day. Now, Dean, it's your turn. Beat that. My brother's a comedian, folks. I'm Dean. I'm the oldest. He's got a twin just as ugly as he is. Oh. He would have been here, but we didn't find out about this until the last minute, and so he's still working. Larry and I are retired. I'm a retired plumber of 43 years with Local 344 in Oklahoma City. I'm a construction plumber, but I've done everything plumbing-wise. So that's what I am. Like Larry, I went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. I graduated, but the doors didn't open for me to go into ministry. Not in the way he did, and you did. So I spent my life ministering in the construction field, witnessing to guys in hard hats, and short sleeves, and sweaty shirts. It was a rough life. It's been a good life. God's prospered me well. I make good money. I've got a good retirement. But there's still something lacking.
In all these years, I've remained faithful to the church. I've given my witness. I'm going to tell you a story about Kabbalah. Chuck's brother, his name was Greg.
Greg.
So, I don't know if you all knew Stephen Pawnshop, we called him Chuck. And his brother's name was Greg. And one day we got this bright idea. They had some big old tractor tires, about this tall. And Kabbalah's up on a big old hill. And so, it wasn't my idea, so I'm not taking credit. So, but anyway, Greg decided that he would do this after it was suggested to him. He got inside the tire. And to be safe, they gave him a pillow. So he had a pillow in there with him. Now, for you that have never been to Kabbalah, it's on an incline of about like this. Almost 45 going down. And we pushed that tire off over the hill. Elephant grass grows to be 10 to 12 feet tall. It rolled down, hit a rock, came up out of the elephant grass. It had to be over the top of that TV. Came down, bounced 2 times, and on down the hill. And then the panic set in. Down at the bottom of the hill was the pump house, where the water came from. And by the pump house is a big pond. And so we're flying down the hill now because after we see this big bump, our eyes all got about this big, we don't know if he's going to survive landing in the water in a tire. So fortunately, when we got down there, he didn't get into the water. And he survived. I'm not sure he was ever the same. But, for those of you that had kids at Kabbalah, this is the kind of things we did. Yeah. I'm going to tell you a little different kind of story. I also told this story. I wasn't asked to retell it, but I'm going to tell it because most of you haven't heard it. In 1968, the folks came over to take us back from Nigeria to Sierra Leone by road. So they drove all the way from Sierra Leone to Nigeria, to Jos, Nigeria. We drove all the way back. And it was a great trip. And we got into Ghana, and we were traveling along a nice little dirt road, trees over the road that was nice and shady. It was beautiful, just like going through a tunnel. And all of a sudden it just locked up. Like Dad had just stomped on the brakes. But the engine wasn't running anymore. And so he tried to start it, but the engine would not even turn over. He said, well, I'll just have to go up the road until I find somebody to help us. So he said, you're in charge, and he took off and left me there. And so in about 45 minutes, he returned with the tow truck. Wow. Guy picked the thing up, drug us back into town. And as he pulled into his garage with the tow truck and our van, right across the street was a Catholic church. And the priest came out of the Catholic church and came over to us and said, are you having car trouble? And we said, yeah. Yeah, and he said, well, you've got the right guy here. He'll take care of you. He said, you're going to have to go down probably to Accra, which is the capital of Ghana, and get the parts to fix this. So he said, here's my car keys. Wow. And he gave us his car keys. He said, I'm leaving right now to go on sabbatical for a year. I won't be back. He said, when you get back with the car and you're done, just put the car keys on the kitchen table, close the doors of the house, and be on your way. He left us his house, his car keys, his food, his water, everything in his house. The gentleman across the street analyzed the VW, and he said that one of the valves had burned and got cherry red and dropped and fell on the piston head, blew the piston up. This guy was the head mechanic for Volkswagen in Accra, and he had decided to leave there and come up country to his hometown and open a Volkswagen garage. He and Dad went down that night and got the parts, came back the next morning. He finished the car that day, and we were on our way by evening. Not one detail did God overlook. Not one thing. Our God is a great God.
Amen.
Merciful, blessing, wonderful, loving God. He has made provision for us in every way. All you have to do is remain faithful to Him and stand up for Him.
Appreciate you, brother. Just appreciate it.
Al, it's in me. I want you to know that you can have concern for all the other religions in the world. I want you to know that you can have concern for the little children. God didn't tell you not to feed them just because they're parents or because they say they're Muslim or because they're Buddhists or because they're Catholic. Catholic being a Christian religion, by the way. But you still have to remain faithful to Christ. Because if you don't profess that to them, they don't know that they will be lost. And by the way, everybody gets a choice. God doesn't put anybody in hell. You put yourself there by the choice you make. Now, is that hard and heavy enough and straight line? That's the only way I know how to tell it, folks. We don't have an evil God. He's not a condemning God. He's a loving God because He sent His Son so that everybody could be saved. It's just one of those things. Now, if God in His infinite wisdom later on says to people, I'm going to take you in, that's above my pay grade. God makes all the decisions. But Jesus is my decision here. Okay?
Amen.